Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, March 31st. So, March has come and gone. It's been, it's been an odd month and odd year so far. Uh, Things are about the same with me. I had still been having some breathing difficulties, mainly when I lay down. But I had a home visit of a nurse today. It wasn't much help, other than to say my blood oxygen levels were okay. At least they were at that time. But I was breathing like I am now, which is actually very good compared to what I can get. But the advice was, well, it'll take time. You have had COVID. It's only to be expected. Then she left. Okay. And I think now they officially call long COVID if it goes over 12 weeks. I'm nearing that, I think. I don't know exactly. It was at the end of January that I was tested positive while I was in the hospital. So, but still things are about the same. I'm still struggling to read a bit, but I have had a bit of spurt earlier in the week. And as I mentioned on Friday, I was going to read Lost Horizon by James Hilton, which I have done. I've finished it and watched the film. So I thought I'd just do a quick little summary of it. I'm not up to going into any huge detail, but I don't know if anybody's familiar with James Hilton. He was a popular novelist in the 30s and probably up to the 40s. I'm not sure exactly. He was born in, it says here, Lancashire in 1900. And another well-known book, other than Lost Horizon, is Goodbye, Mr. Chips. And eventually I'll be getting to that. I'll reread that, but I don't know if I don't think I have the film, so I'll have to someday track down a copy of the film. But Lost Horizon is I really like it. It's set in India in like 1931, and the main character that it's about is a Hugh Conway, who's sort of a minor consul, minor diplomat, and it's mentioned that he's very minor. But he was sent to a place called Baskul to get 80 sort of Westerners out because there was a revolution. So he does that, and on the sort of last plane going out, and that's been sort of loaned by a Maharaja, takes him, his assistant, who's I think he's British too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's British, and an American, and a woman that is a British missionary. And they sort of tumble into the plane. They take off, but unbeknownst to them at that point, the plane has been hijacked by somebody else and takes them in the wrong direction. Takes them over the Himalayas and eventually crashes the plane way up in the Himalayas. And it's, freezing temperatures, thin air, and they've got no provisions. They've got, the plane is wrecked. So, but out of nowhere, basically, a little group from a lamasery, a lama, what do you call it? Well, not church, monastery, lamasery, come and save them, take them on sort of a perilous sort of journey, almost up narrow ledges in snowstorm and really high up, and then go into this little pass, and there's a valley called Shangri-La, and it's protected on all sides. The weather is warm. There's people that are living there. and they're taken into the Lamasery. They still don't know how or why or what happened, and there's their guide is a guy named Chang, a Chinese person, and he's waiting to become a monk, and it apparently takes a long time. Now, at some point, Hugh Conway, the main character, gets taken to the High Lama and gets told a story of how the Lamasery sort of started in its present day form. Was in the early 1700s. I want to say it was a Portuguese. I think it might have been. I can't remember now. Let's see my brain, but a Portuguese, I think, missionary comes, finds a place. It was a bit derelict, but he stayed, and he stayed, and he stayed some more. But he found out that there was a drug there. They don't really specify what it is, but he became an addict of it, and he lived to like 100 and some, and then they thought he was dying, but then he sort of revived. And this is 1931, and he's still alive. And through that time, they found gold, and so they've traded for all sorts of things like books. They got a huge library, and music scores, art, everything. They've got running water and everything. And he finds out that he was actually brought there. Hugh Conway was brought there purposely to the Lamasery, and they're told that they can't leave. So he's reconciled with this, but then his sort of assistant wants to go. And in the meantime, they find out that the American that's with them is in disguise. He was a disgraced and embezzler of a company. They find out that, but he decides to stay. He wants to stay because it's a good hiding place. And the missionary decides to set up a Christian missionary there, because she thinks they're sort of heathens. But the assistant wants to leave, and Conway sort of figures that he can't. Well, he sort of lets him go. He tries to talk him out of it, but he comes back because he's too scared to go across the pass. But he bribed some porters that brought in books and other things, and they're waiting for him. So he talks Conway into going. So Conway goes, and eventually he dies on the way, and Conway, like they get separated, and Conway barely makes it back alive. He stumbles into a village. He's taken care of by some nuns. He's lost his memory totally. But then somebody that has known him, that went to school with him, sort of accidentally is there, and sees him and knows who he is, tells who he is, but still there's no recollection. So he takes him and is going to take him back to London, and they're on a ship to go back to London, when all of a sudden Conway gets his memory back, and that's from playing a piece by Chopin that he said he was taught by Chopin's assistant or a student, and it's an unknown piece. So he gets his memory back, and he just wants to get back to Shangri-La. So he jumps ship, and he spends, he just sort of is trying to get back. I think it was like at Singapore or something like that, that he jumped ship, and he just was going to go, he just goes over land. He does everything that he can to do everything, and there's wild stories of him. And the last story basically was that he was going over a mountain pass that's unpassable, and that's the last anybody had ever seen of him. So that's where the book ends. Now we get to the movie. This was written in 1933. Frank Capra, the director, It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, um, It Happened One Night. I could go on. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Meet John Doe, Pocket Full of America. Like, yeah, you could go on and on. You Can't Take It With You, and so forth. Decides he picks up a paperback of it, in a train station, and takes it to Warner Brothers. Harry Cohn. No, Warner Brothers? Is it Warner? No, Columbia. Yeah, sorry, I was getting confused there. Columbia, to Harry Cohn, one of the executives, and says, you got to buy this. So he decides to make it, and this is 1936, and he gets Ronald Colman, um, John Howard, Jane Wyatt, and Thomas Mitchell, to star in it, and Edward Everett Horton. They created his character, a fifth wheel, for this. And just as before I go on, there's another, as with Some Like It Hot, there was a Star Trek connection, and there's a Star Trek connection to this. Jane Wyatt, she eventually played. This is 1937, but she eventually played in the original series, like Grace Lee Whitney. She played, that I mentioned from Some Like It Hot. She played Yeoman Rand. Jane Wyatt played Spock's mother, or a reoccurring role, and there she is there, in 1937. She died actually in 1996, I think it was. But yeah, so the script was by Robert Riskin, was working on the script, and they changed it quite a bit. They changed the name Hugh Conway to Robert Conway, and they had John Howard as his brother rather than his assistant, even though John Howard was American, and obviously his accent didn't match. But, well, okay, yeah, you suspend disbelief for the length of the film. So, and they also, as I say, they created the character Edward Everett Horton, which was in a lot of films, the character actor of the 30s, to be sort of comic relief. And Jane Wyatt's character was sort of created as well, to be a love interest, because in the film there was a young woman who played piano, that Conway sort of became infatuated with, but she was like, at that point 80 some years old, even though she looked like she was 17 or 18, because of the longevity of the people, and that was in the book. But in the film, it's Jane Wyatt's character. They sort of have romance, and she was the one that asked to have him brought there, because after reading his books, and they inflated his character, his position from a minor consul to basically really high in the diplomatic service. So, and then he becomes, he meets the High Lama, and he realizes that the High Lama is like 200 and some years old, and learns that he's been chosen to take over the Lamasery when the High Lama dies. There's no mention about the drug at all. The female character that was a missionary in the book becomes a prostitute. Missionary, prostitute. Okay, I guess that was not a big leap. I'm not sure. But they obviously couldn't say she was a prostitute, but it's pretty clear that she is. But because of the Hays Code, and censorship, they couldn't actually say she was a prostitute. So, and yeah, and it just goes on. It sort of follows a little bit, but having the other young guy as his brother, it creates more of they thought, an emotional bond between them, and that's why he would leave with them. So, yeah, and it just goes with that, and he does leave, and the same way, and he goes, but they take another woman that is a young woman who stands in sort of for the character that was the pianist in the book. She goes with them, and then promptly in a few days, ages to like her own age and dies, and the brother John Howard's character jumps off sort of a cliff, sort of in madness. So and eventually Conway makes it back to civilization. And again, he's lost his memory, but then there's sort of a backstory, just not a backstory, but sort of a fill-in saying that, yeah, he jumped ship. None of this is showing. And he's, and the character that he was with that knew him in school tracked him, but he was always just a day or two late. And, he was always a step ahead. And yeah, and then he lost him, and he doesn't know what happened. But the film ends with basically it looks like, yeah, he's made it back to Shangri-La. Credits. The filming of it is quite interesting too, because Frank Capra went a little nuts. He filmed like 1,000,000 feet of film. He had sometimes 3-4 cameras. And I guess his first sort of cut could have been almost 6 hours long. And then he cut it down again to like 3.5 hours approximately. And audiences were falling asleep. They didn't like it. There was lots of filming with him with the Lama, just talking about philosophy, life, culture of Shangri-La. And they decided, well, get rid of that. So it was eventually pared down to 132 minutes, so about almost 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And that's sort of where it aired, and it made a sensation. But then when it was, and then like World War II started, they reissued it and they cut it down. They kept cutting it, and there have been so many cuts for this, and just getting cut and cut and cut. But they changed it, sort of. They called it, Lost Horizon of the Shangri-La or something like that, because somebody had asked the president, like in the Second World War, where did the planes come from? And he says, "Oh, our secret base in Shangri-La." So Columbia thought it would be a good idea to get it back out, and they changed it, and it's a Japanese sort of, invading China, and that's sort of how it is. They actually had Chinese stand-ins, so it was no longer India in the film. It became China, and then it was Japan that sort of was invading. So yeah, and it just kept getting cut and cut and cut, and there was, and then in the early 70s, they started to restore it, and there was a 1999 DVD release. Complete. They had to use some stills. They had a soundtrack from England from the BFI. They had like a 16mm print from French Canadian television that was dubbed into French, but it had a few scenes that wasn't in other things. Then they had another cut source from England again that had a few extra scenes. So there's probably, I think, about six or 7 minutes that they have to use throughout stills, but they've got the soundtrack, as I say, so you can hear what's going on. And for this release in 2014, they found an extra minute somewhere, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, the acting is really great. Ronald Colman, I really like. He's got an amazing voice. I really like his radio program called The Halls of Ivy, which is really good. And an interesting thing is, like, yeah, well, he started, like, I think his first sound picture was Bulldog Drummond, which was a series of stories, novels, and then made into films. And then his co-star in here, his brother, John Howard, became sort of the biggest, or the longest running Bulldog Drummond for a while. Like, I think did about 7 or 8 films. So there's an interesting connection there. But yeah, no, it's just a fabulous film, and sort of it's interesting to see how this is why I like it. That's why I say it always it's interesting. I watch a film, if I like it, I'm interested more in it, like the source material, whether it be a play or the novel, and then I love the story behind it, the production and everything, and how they got the actors, how they filmed it, and on this version, it's from the DVD version, the same, the commentary with um, Robert Gitt, who restored it. He spent 25 years restoring, or more now, I guess. If he must be still alive, I would think. But and it just in discussion with somebody else, so he goes into all the details of the restoration of the film up to that point. And with this one, there's a couple essays which are really good, and some there's still photos. It's just it's a little digibook. There's sort of I don't know if that's the wrap party or whatever for the film. But yeah, no, it's really great, and as I say, I get to read more stuff, and I no longer have Capra's autobiography, which I do want to get again. It's called Name Above the Title, and also probably a biography of two of him. And but yeah, just all around fabulous film. I've been reading next is Beau Geste, which I'll probably be done very shortly. As I said, I've had a spurt of reading this week. Beau Geste is sort of a even though it's written in the 20s, it's sort of a it's like a British Empire type novel, even though it's French Foreign Legion, so it's the French Empire type thing. And then obviously I've got the film here with Ray Milland, Robert Preston, Gary Cooper, directed by William A. Wellman, Wild Bill Wellman, who I'd read a biography of earlier, and there's commentary by William Wellman Jr., who wrote the biography, and Frank Thompson. So that'll be fun to read. So, and then after that, I've got I'm going to be reading, after I finish this one, I'm going to do Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I've got the book here. I can't remember the author's name. No, that's not it. This is it. It's a John Huston direct film with Humphrey Bogart and Walter Huston, John Huston's father. This is B. Traven. So this will be the next one I read. Yeah, it's about 300 pages long, so it'll be a little while. Either that, or I might do, because something a little short, because that was long, so I might do something short in between. Is To Serve with Love by E.R. Braithwaite, which I have the film and the book for as well. But yeah, so I don't know if this is something that you sort of like to hear, because I'm not going to be doing anything else, sort of reading any more sort of detailed material for a while, because this is straining me, and I have to really think a lot to even coherently speak, or partially coherently. But the fiction is about all I can do. So, and if it is something you like to do, please pop into comments to say that, yeah, it's something you'd like to see more of, or you don't want to see any more of, whichever. And what you think of the film. Have you seen Lost Horizon, or any other Frank Capra films, since we're talking about that, or any of the films that I've talked about. So anyway, I will call it quits there. And this is sort of the film Lost Horizon and book by James Hilton. Take care, BookTube.